Hello and welcome to the Bell Mama Hypnobirthing and Positive Birth podcast. My name is Ellie Waddington. I'm a hypnobirthing teacher, antenatal instructor and positive birth coach, and I'm here to help you go into the birth of your baby with a positive mindset. Every week I share my top tips, advice and amazing birth stories to help you go from fearful and anxious about your birth to positive and confident. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and let's get into this episode. Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode. I'm going to start off this episode by apologising for my voice. I am extremely croaky this week. We are all full of coughs and colds and snot, and there's very little that I can do about it. So just before recording this episode, I've taken a lot of Lemsip, I've taken some lemon and honey, I've done everything that I can to try and soothe my throat, and this is about as good as it's going to get. So again, my apologies, but I have done my best. I'm just really grateful that I did not choose to record a pregnancy relaxation this week, because this would absolutely not be relaxing. I'm really grateful that I did that last week instead. And I'm also really grateful that this is a week when the childminder is on holiday anyway, because there is nothing worse than prepaying for your childminder, for your child to then be sick and be at home and have wasted that day of money. But there we go, here we are. On this second week of the summer holidays, we are all still in very high spirits, still cracking on, still going, but just with a bit of snot. So this week I am going to talk to you guys about birth plans. Birth plans it's a really meaty topic. It's something that I really love talking about. I get really into it, and I set aside a whole 2 hours of my hypnobirthing course when I work with my clients to talk about choices, making decisions about your care, and putting together a really well-informed researched birth plan. It's something that I am really passionate about, and I can talk for literally hours. So I've had to write myself some little bullet points for this episode to keep myself on track, to make sure that I don't go on and on and on, because I'm not sure that my computer has that much storage, to be honest, for me to be chatting for hours and hours about birth plans. So I've got a few things that I do want to talk about. Now, first off, I'm just going to chat about why I'm deciding to do an episode on birth plans this week. This is an episode that I hadn't planned to do for a few months, so I didn't want to do this yet, this early on in my podcast series. But it came at a time. This week there's been a little bit of an upset on Instagram in the birth world. There is an influencer, a content creator. So she's very well known. She has a lot of followers. And this particular creator has created a reel this week that has basically put a real negative spin on birth plans. And to be honest, she was being quite unkind about women that aim for natural births with no pain relief, or water births or home births or whatever. She was quite unkind about it, and so there are lots of us birth workers that have really quite taken offence to this particular reel. Now obviously she is a comedian, this is what she does, she doesn't mean any harm by it, and I completely get that. Normally her videos are actually quite funny. She does these reels about parenting life and mum life, and they're really relatable, funny reels usually. But this particular reel, it just didn't pass the vibe check. It was very icky, and lots of us birth workers did get our knickers in a twist about it. Now, at this moment in time of recording, that video has had 2.9 million views. Now, I'm very certain that lots of those views will be perturbed birth workers, but lots of those views are also going to be pregnant mums, new mums, that are umming and ahhing about whether to do a birth plan, whether it is worth all of that time and effort. And if you are one of those people and you are listening to me right now, yes, do the birth plan. Birth plans are so incredibly important. I have had 2 very different births. I've had one birth with my son, so about 4 years ago, that I would describe as traumatic. It was not a pleasant experience, and I would say the number one factor for me having a negative experience with my first birth is the fact that I did not make a birth plan. I did not put time and effort into researching my options, learning how to make decisions, and I did not make a birth plan. And that's a really bold statement to say that the negative experience was because of my lack of birth plan, but I stand by it, because all of the other things that came and that created a negative experience would not have happened had I created a birth plan. So that's my stance on that. That's where I stand. Now, the main objection that I hear to birth plans, the number one reason that people don't want to make a birth plan, they're advised not to, it's poo-pooed, is because apparently birth never goes according to plan. Now, I take objection to that because my second birth did go according to plan. But I absolutely take the point that birth is unpredictable. It does take twists and turns, and you can't control everything. I absolutely take that point, and I fully agree with it. But that doesn't mean that you don't plan for things. Can you imagine if you chose not to put in an offer on your dream house because buying a house doesn't always go according to plan? You know, you might not have your offer accepted, you might lose the roof of that dream house in a storm, the buying process might collapse halfway through, so just don't bother putting in that offer on that absolute dream house because it all might go wrong. You'd never think like that, would you? Or imagine not applying to your dream uni because you might not get accepted, because you might not complete your course. You know, just go to whichever uni you're told, because that's the easiest way to do things. No, you wouldn't ever choose not to go for your dreams and ambitions just because it might not happen, just because things might change. That's ludicrous. That's a ridiculous way to live. And I absolutely believe that with births. I think it's really quite unkind to tell someone, don't even try for your dream birth. Don't even think about that lovely home birth in front of your fire at home. Don't even think about that nice midwife-led unit with the stars on the ceiling. Don't even think about that. It never goes according to plan. Don't aim for that. Just go with the flow and see what happens. I think that's a really unkind thing to tell people. So when I am going through birth plans with my clients and I'm teaching them what they should be considering, how to make decisions, how to make these birth plans, I always talk about plan A, plan B, and plan C. Now, plan A is your dream birth. It's if everything went exactly as you wanted it to, all went according to plan, how would you want your birth to look? So where would you birth? Who would you have present? What kind of pain relief options would you have? Would you have skin to skin? All these things. Plan A is what would happen if everything went as you envision it. When you see your birth in your head, how do you want it to go? Now, plan B is about planning for all those eventualities, and that's where this mentality of, things never go according to plan, this is where that comes in. Absolutely, things can take a different turn in birth, so plan for it. In your plan B, you make decisions about which interventions you'd be happy to accept, to consent to, and which ones you wouldn't want to consent to. At what point would you accept an induction? Okay, at what point would you accept a vaginal examination? At what point if you're having a home birth, would you consent to being transferred to hospital? All of these things that could deviate from your plan A, if things didn't go according to your plan A, put those in your plan B. Always look at all the benefits and risks of anything that you could be offered and make those decisions ahead of time, because I can tell you now from my first birth that was traumatic that trying to make decisions in labour when you are full of hormones, when you're scared, when you're in pain, when you're surrounded by strangers that already have the gloves on and the implements in front of you, that is not informed consent. That is terrifying. It's really, really scary to be in that position. So if you make those decisions ahead of time, if you do your research, if you know the implications of what it is that you are consenting to, and you are happy in your decision, you are confident in that decision, that is the right decision for you and your baby, that is such a better place to be in. You can make peace with that ahead of time, and you know that even if you don't get your plan A, you have still made those decisions. You are still in control of that. Now, plan C is if you were to elect for a planned cesarean or an emergency cesarean. If an emergency cesarean does happen, for whatever reason, there are things that you can still control. Have a look at your options when it comes to gentle cesareans. You can still stay in control of who is in that room with you, music that's playing, having skin to skin with your baby. You can choose to have the screen lowered so you can see your baby emerging from your belly. There are so many things that you can still remain in control of, okay? Just because you were in an operating theatre and you are having your belly cut open and your baby removed that way, that does not mean that you lose control, and I really want you to understand that. So that's what I tell everybody. You are not just putting together a birth plan, you are putting together plan A, plan B, and plan C. And you know what? If you're really, really organised, go for all scenarios. If you have the time and the inclination, go for plan D, E, and the rest of the alphabet as well, and plan for all those different scenarios so that you remain in control. So yes, absolutely, birth does take a different twist. It can take different twists and turns. It can take a different journey, but that is not a reason not to put a plan in place. So I was writing notes for this episode, and I've really struggled with containing it to a few points. I listed this episode as my top 3 things that you should be including in your birth plan, but I really struggled to discern what are the 3 most important things. So instead, I'm just going to share with you 3 important things that you should be thinking about with regards to your birth plan. They're not my top 3 things because I really struggled to rank everything that you should be including in a birth plan. It's all really important. The entire birth plan is important. So I have instead shared with you 3 important things that you should be putting in your birth plan, or that you should be thinking about with regards to your birth plan. So first off on my list of things to be thinking about in your birth plan is your birth team. And by that I mean the people around you supporting you during the birth of your baby. And I can tell you that having nobody around you, being entirely by yourself, is better than having a bad birth team. Okay, your birth team, the energy, the phrases, things that are going on around you have the ability to make or break your spirit. If you are struggling with something, having unsupportive people around you that aren't lifting you up, that aren't giving you those supportive vibes, they will just cause you to spiral. You need stable people around you that support your choices, that are strong, they love you, they're radiating love and warmth. You need those people around you during the birth of your baby. So first off, I'd argue the most important person is your birth partner. That is going to be the person that you connect with most during the birth of your baby. And I've heard lots of different birthing partner stories. There are some where even just their birth partner being quietly in the corner of the room, being visible, makes a huge difference to the woman in labour. So you need to make sure that your birth partner is someone who supports your choices. First off, when you are pregnant, make sure that they know and understand your birth choices. If you're doing a hypnobirthing course, make sure your birth partner goes with you. Make sure they know what it is that you're doing, what your birth choices are, and make sure they understand all of them so that they can advocate for you. If you are in your zone and you are focusing on your surges, if you are just relaxing, if you're doing your meditations or whatever, you don't want to be constantly answering questions. You don't want somebody just constantly nagging you with questions, this, that, and the other. Your birth partner, I always describe your birth partner as the keeper of the cave or the protector of your space. They are there to make sure that you are comfortable, that people don't bother you, that your wishes and your choices are upheld. I had a specific bit on my birth plan that said if there are any questions, direct them to my husband first. He knows what I want, he knows my choices, he knows my birth plan, and if he feels there is something worth bothering me with, then he will make that decision. Otherwise, you can take his answer to any questions you have. And the midwives respected that at my home birth. And this is my second birth with my daughter, which was about a year and a half ago. Yeah, she was born in March last year. That was a home birth, and it was a completely different experience to my first birth, but I digress. Yeah, so I had a little sentence in my birth plan that said that everything is going to go through my husband and he will decide whether or not to bother me with it. So he was very much the protector of my space. He was there, his amazing masculine protector energy, and I felt safe. I felt protected. I knew that he was fully on my side and by my side. It was absolutely amazing, and you need to make sure that your birth partner is there for you. They are showing up for you. I would say make sure they are not someone that needs their hand holding. You do not need to be making sure that they're okay. You've got a very important job to do during labour. You are birthing a baby. You do not need to be constantly checking on them to make sure they're okay. They are the ones, they are supposed to be, that they need to be doing things without being asked. They need to know exactly what's expected of them, and they need to crack on with it. So make sure that it is someone who is stable, who can think for themselves, who is strong, and who will support you. So the second people on your birth team is likely to be a midwife. Now, of course, free birth is a completely valid and safe and legal choice in the UK. You might decide to birth without any healthcare professionals present. That's called free birth, and that's absolutely fine. But the majority of people will birth with a midwife present. Now, you have the choice of NHS midwives, which obviously are free, no cost to you at point of service, or an independent midwife. Now, NHS midwives obviously work for the NHS. If you birth in a hospital, you have to accept that they might be dashing out to different rooms. They might be looking after several women at the same time. There might be a particularly busy day at the hospital that day. So you might need to accept that you are not going to be their sole focus of attention on that day. If you choose to birth in a midwife-led unit, that's less likely to happen. There are going to be fewer women on a midwife-led unit, but again, they might be dividing their attention between you and another person or two other people. If you choose to birth at home, you are likely to have the full attention of those midwives. So if you choose to birth at home in the UK, you have the option of having 2 NHS midwives attend you in your home, or you can choose to pay privately for an independent midwife. And in my experience, independent midwives are a little bit more sympathetic when it comes to natural birth. They have seen a lot more physiological birth. They're a lot more patient. They're happy to sit back and wait and see if things play out rather than jumping in with interventions. Now, of course, that's a huge generalization, and I'm not saying all NHS midwives are happy to jump in with intervention straight away. Obviously, that's not true. But I'm just saying, in my experience, independent midwives are just a little bit more patient when it comes to physiological birth unfolding. So that's something to think about, is whether you might want to hire an independent midwife for your birth, or whether you are happy to have NHS midwives attend you for your birth. I had 2 lovely NHS midwives attend me in my home for my home birth. They were both absolutely lovely people. One of them took up my phone and just took thousands of pictures of my birth, and I'm so grateful to her, because I now have this timeline of my birth with all these gritty pictures of me giving birth, and I absolutely love looking through those, and so I'm so grateful to her. And I'm grateful to both of them for respecting my birth choices and stepping back and being just quietly in the corner of the room and letting me get on with it. I birthed my baby in the birth pool, in my living room in front of the fire, on my knees, and I was largely just left to go with my bodily urges. And so I'll always be really, really grateful for them for letting me just do that, basically, just respecting my space and letting me do that. Now, the third person on your birth team potentially is a doula. Now, I recommend everyone look into hiring a doula. A doula is essentially a woman who is hired purely to support you, purely to be your support during birth. They have loads of tips and tricks up their sleeve for helping you cope with labour sensations, for supporting you, for helping you manage your mindset during birth. Doulas are truly amazing people. There are various different price ranges for doulas, and I know that not everyone can afford that. There are some doulas that will reduce prices in certain circumstances, but do research, have a look in your area, which doulas are operating, who is available. I really do recommend that. Now, the other thing to think about, of course, is family members. Do you want family members around you giving birth? Some people do have mothers and mother-in-laws that are a little bit pushy, that kind of angle that they want to be present at the birth. Do not allow yourself to be bullied into having anyone present in your birth room that you do not want there. If someone is going to make you feel uncomfortable, that's going to have a real knock-on effect for your labour. If you do not feel safe, protected and unobserved in your birth space, that will cause labour to slow down and maybe even stall. So do not be afraid to put in place boundaries. If someone is pushing to be present that you do not want present, it is absolutely okay to say no. But there are lots of people that you might want present at your birth. If you want your mum there, if you want your sister, your aunt, if you want siblings, if you have older children that you want there, think about that. Seeing their mum give birth to their little brother or sister, that can be an absolutely amazing thing for them to witness. So do have a little think about which family members you might want present at your birth. And the last thing that I want you to think about is students. So often you will be asked, are you happy for students to be present in your birth room to observe, or maybe for them to actually do things, to actually be active in the birth of your baby. So you can put on your birth plan whether or not you are happy for students to be to take an active role, whether you're happy for them to be present in the birth room and just observe, or whether you don't want any students present whatsoever. You have the right to put that in your birth plan. So that is everything that I wanted to say on your birth team, the people supporting you during the birth of your baby. Have a think about it, put it on your birth plan. The next thing that I want to talk to you about with regards to your birth plan is the third stage. Now, in case you're wondering what I'm on about, the third stage is the part of labour that we refer to when you've birthed your baby and you now have to birth your placenta. Your placenta now has to come out. Often this is something that's overlooked, it's forgotten about because you've given birth to your baby, you're now snuggling them, maybe you're putting them on the boob, and you kind of forget there's another stage or something else that you need to do. You have to birth your placenta, essentially. And there are two options available to you when it comes to birthing your placenta. There's what we call a managed third stage or a physiological third stage. Now, if you have had a physiological birth where there were no complications, you've had no that there wasn't an instrumental delivery, you've had no assistance, then most people will opt for a physiological third stage. I mean that you wait for the placenta to come away naturally. Your placenta will basically start to come away from the wall of your uterus through oxytocin, basically the same thing that causes labour to happen. It's oxytocin, and you'll start to get more contractions, and it will start to happen naturally for most people. So the conditions for your third stage, really they need to be pretty much the same as the conditions for actually birthing your baby. You need to feel safe, happy, supported, loved, unobserved. You don't need someone there with a watch saying your placenta needs to come out now. You need to just be left to it, basically. And so if that's something that you do want, if physiological third stage is something you're passionate about, make sure you put it on your birth plan and say that you want a physiological third stage and that you don't want to be nagged with regards to time, with regards to your placenta coming out. Now, a managed third stage it's actually offered to everybody. Everyone is offered the synthetic oxytocin injection to encourage the placenta to come away. This injection, it can speed up the placenta coming away, and in some cases it can reduce the risk of a postpartum hemorrhage. And usually that's in the case of if you've had an induction or if you have had an instrumental delivery. That's usually when the synthetic oxytocin injection can reduce your chances of postpartum hemorrhage. So if that is something that you do want to accept, again, put that on your birth plan, and you can always change your mind. Remember that anything you put on your birth plan, you can change your mind. You can get up to the point of them just about to give you the injection and you can say, actually, I've changed my mind, I don't want that. You're allowed to do that. So as with all things, do your research now. Look into the risks and benefits of both physiological and managed third stage in lots of different circumstances, and write down on your birth plans when you would be happy for those scenarios. And the third thing that I have included in my list of things that are important that you need to be thinking about in your birth plan, and I think I kind of regret putting this in this list now because I don't think I'm going to be able to do this topic justice in the next 5 minutes, and it is induction. Now, induction is a huge, huge topic in the birth world, and that's because in the UK at the moment, our induction rate's at around 33% nationwide, and where I am in Northumberland, actually our induction rates are more like 40 to 42%. That means that is 40 to 42% of women that are accepting induction for their babies. And I say accepting, a lot of those women actually won't know that they have a choice. They won't have researched the topic properly, they won't know what their options are, and so they will have just gone along with it because they felt they had to, like they had no other choice. But induction, it's such a big topic. Now, you can be offered induction for so many reasons. You could be offered induction because you've gone past your due date. You could be offered induction because your waters have already broken and you haven't gone into labour naturally. You could be offered induction because your baby is measuring big. You could be offered induction because your baby is measuring small. You could be offered induction because you've had IVF. There are so many reasons that you could be offered an induction of labour, and it's optional. I want you to know that it's always an offer. You do not have to accept an offer of induction. You have the option to decline it entirely if you don't want an induction. You have the option of saying, I don't want to talk about this right now, I'm going to revisit the topic again next week. It's always optional. And something I do remind people is that if you are being offered an induction, it does not mean that your healthcare professionals are immediately concerned for yours or baby's health, because inductions can take quite a long time to work. You know, they're not immediate. If you go into hospital for an induction, you are not guaranteed to have your baby that day. It can take days to go into labour through having an induction. If your healthcare providers were truly concerned immediately for yours or your baby's health, they would be offering immediate cesarean section. If you're being offered an induction, it means that you have days potentially to wait, and you have days to make that decision. If you want to go home, and I always do recommend this actually, if you're offered an induction, do not make your decision then and there in that OB's office or in that midwife's office. I always say to people, tell them, thank you for your advice, I'm going to go home, talk it through with my partner, and we're going to come to a decision that's right for us and ring you back. Always go home, always think about it, always do your research. So in your birth plans, I recommend that you research induction, everything to do with induction. There are some really, really great books, and I'm going to put some really great recommendations for books on induction in the description of this episode below. So do have a little look at those books that I recommend for researching your options when it comes to induction. Do your research ahead of time. So start doing it now. Look at what you could be offered induction for. Look at the different methods of induction. You could even go so far as researching your particular hospital or your local trust, what their policies are with regards to induction. When might they be offering induction? What methods of induction do they use? Because induction isn't just one thing. There are so many different layers to it. So make sure that you're researching all of it and make those decisions before you're sat in an office being offered that induction. Make sure you know what it is that you are consenting to. Make sure you know what it is that you are declining if you choose to decline it. Make those decisions now. So I have been talking about birth plans now for over half an hour, and I think that's quite enough from me. I'm going to go and give my voice a little bit of a break. Now obviously I have just literally touched the surface of birth plans and inductions and birth teams and the third stage. I have literally just touched the surface of those topics in this half an hour podcast. If you have any questions about these things, do feel free to get in touch with me. You can email me and I'm always happy to discuss these things with you. But I do go into them in a lot more detail on my hypnobirthing courses, and you can find details of those on my website. So do go ahead and have a look at that. I really hope that you have enjoyed chatting about birth plans and that you are now more likely to go ahead and make yourself a birth plan and go into it in detail. Literally, don't be afraid to write pages and pages of your birth plan and plan that plan A, plan B, plan C, and D, E, and the rest of the alphabet as well. And my last top tip, this really is a top tip, a very important tip, is make sure that you print out lots of copies, because you don't want to risk your single copy of your birth plans going walkabouts. You want to make sure there is a copy in your hospital bag, in your birth partner's pocket, in your hospital notes, in the midwives' notes. You want to make sure that everyone has a copy of your birth plan and that everyone has access to it. So that's all from me. I really am going to stop talking now. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will chat to you again next week. Bye!